If I'm a good father, it's that I try to be half the father as my father was, you know. And I had I had a father who I thought was a prince, even though at times we disappointed him in terms of what we did as teenagers, as kids, with all that energy. But for the most part, I just thought when I sit down and analyze what he gave me, the sense of comfort, the sense of safety that he gave me. And mind you, he wasn't a big man. I'm a foot taller than my father, but the sense of presence and the way he took on the responsibility of caring for the family, all those things I was able to take with me into fatherhood. And hopefully, even though some things I think I could have done differently, hopefully those would have some sort of impact on my daughter. And our relationship is a testimony that it has had some impact on her. You know, and so but that's only because my father was there in the household at a time. My mother was there. We had a unit as a family with 5 children and mother and father, and that they were that we did things as a family. We traveled on vacation together as a family. There was the concept of me was something that had limitations within the family, and the idea that the family took precedence over me, the individual. So we all took on some sort of responsibility, whether it's the upkeep of the house, or whether it's the cooking of the meals, and all the other kind of things, you know. And I think what it did was it gave me another sensibility. So since there were 4 boys and 1 girl, there was no gender preference given to the boys in terms of responsibility. The boys washed dishes, the boys ironed clothes, the boys cooked. Every one of us knew how to do all of that. So I think those were important because, in a sense, that's what I saw. That's what I saw in the images that I saw in terms of my parents. My father cooked. He washed clothes, he ironed, he did all those things. He took on that. My father was at one point, my mother was my Cub Scout den mother when we lived in the projects when I was a little boy. My father was my youngest brother, who was 12 years younger than me, was his Boy Scout den father when we lived in a house. You know what I'm saying? So I applaud them in the sense of creating the sense of normalcy and the consistency in which they maintain that.
Well, you're fortunate because you grew up in a stable family where your parents were together and they raised you as a team.
Oh yeah.
And you had a great dad. You had an excellent
I had a
father.
great mom and a great dad, and I think that they made each other the best that they could be. You know, I mean, I had one of those mothers who had the most glorious smile that you'd ever want to see, and yet she was a woman of magnitude. She was the president of the local chapter of the National Council of Negro Women. She knew Dr. Dorothy Height well. She was the first in her family in rural Georgia to graduate from college, so she was a woman going somewhere, and she happened to have to pick one of the most gentle men, the most beautiful men I ever met in my life, my dad.
Well,
as a man.
Yeah, I mean that's great because as a divorce lawyer and as a father's rights attorney, you know, I'm a big supporter of children having 2 parents, and when we were growing up, a lot of children had 2 parents.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Unfortunately, it's changed a lot, and a lot of fathers are kicked to the curb, and children suffer, and I've represented a lot of good dads struggling to be there for their children, and the system kicks them out. But fortunately for us, we grew up in a different time.
Yeah, you know, I'm 62 years old, so I grew up in a time when you know, I mean, it was something to get in a car and the family go on a Sunday drive to, you know, down the coast. I grew up in San Francisco, so down to, you know, an hour down the coast as a family, then stop by a little local hamburger French fry place, which was that's the crevet right there. That was the real thing about it. We get some French fries and hamburgers, and it's a family. And I love that, man. I remember that so vividly in my mind, you know, with my parents. And it could be a way in which they were saying, okay, let's, as a family, do something. You know, we don't have a lot of money. We weren't blessed with a lot of money. You know, my parents moved from paycheck to paycheck all the entire time that I lived with them, and after I moved out of the house, you know. But there was this sense of doing something that felt so remarkably wonderful as a family. And I lost a sister and lost a brother, rheumatoid arthritis, my brother, colon cancer, my sister. But I tell you, you know, my younger brothers who are much younger than I am, and I are very, very close, you know, very close.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Actually, I wrote this book, Father's Rights, and in it on pages 46 and 47, I listed a lot of statistics on how father absence affects children, and the most reliable predictor of crime in America is father absence. Right here, 72% of all teenage murderers grew up without fathers. The absence of a biological father increases by 900% a daughter's vulnerability to rape and sexual abuse. And these assaults are not often committed by the dads. They're committed by boyfriends of the custodial parents. So this is these are statistics that are really somewhat new to our society.